recording. Yeah. Hey, buddy.
What's up?
Bro, hold on a minute. Breaking news. I was just adding it to my note. Breaking news on Public Access America. What? That's crazy. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to Public Access America. My name is still Jason. His name, I'm assuming, is still Jeffrey. And we are here, as we are every week, in our live stream to talk about the world and the weirdness going on in it from our perspective. Jeffrey, is this kind of what hell is? Is this one of the rungs of hell where you and I just sit in eternity talking about a world that's burning down around us?
The funny thing was, I was having this conversation with somebody. They're like, what do you think happened? Like, where did we go wrong? And I keep, the running joke for me is that, if I had a time machine, I'd go back to 2015 and tell them not to shoot the gorilla at the zoo because
Yeah.
everything seemed to go to hell right after that.
I think it was right after 2012, believe it or not, the Mayan calendar. We discovered the God particle, and I think that messed us up. We finished the periodic table. We found the final element. We know where all 12 dimensions are, and now it's just like we're fucked up.
Well, I
Ah,
mean, I'm just waiting for, either the world-ending comet or asteroid or alien civilization to find us at this point because, fuck it, why not? Either
yeah.
yeah, either it's going to be a weird day or I'm not going to have to go to work.
Right. I mean, where can it go from here, right?
I mean, honestly, you think about it, like what happens if aliens show up on this planet? Do you think anybody's going to go to work the next day?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a weird sort of thing for me. It's one of those fun things that I imagine, but that I know isn't real. And so that's a tough one for me. My belief is that there's been five civilizations. We're in the latest civilization, and
Hmm.
aliens are just people that have escaped the implosion of their civilization. That there isn't life from other worlds like on Pluto or something, but there is life out there that maybe avoided their apocalypse, and they're coming back down to get DNA because they're turning gray and they don't like it,
You know, that's I was having that. That's another one of those. I was having that conversation with somebody, and when you think about what we know about the universe, you know, our estimate is that the universe is about 13.6 billion years old. Now, our tiny little rock floating around a star is about 4.6 billion years old. And in that time frame, all of written human history is condensed down into approximately what,
5,000 years.
five,
E-
six
Egypt
thousand years?
Egypt is 5,000 years ago. Peru is 5,000 years ago.
But then you also have the Sumerians and all of that too, and that was right around that
Right.
time as well. So I mean, you have maybe even a little older. So you have all of these different civilizations. I mean, even like written language in China and Japan dates back several
Hmm.
thousand years.
Right.
So
It's
you
based
have
on something.
so you have all of these different written forms, and all of what we understand history to be written is only 5,000 years old. Through fossil records, we're finding stuff, billions of years old that existed on this
Right.
planet. It's non-complex life forms. I mean, the idea that we've had anything else complex living here is
Hmm.
we haven't found anything beyond, we haven't found anything that we would consider intelligent like us.
Right.
And and that's where it gets really interesting.
I just think it's hopping. The information that started this civilization was just a former civilization gathering what they could, hopping their apocalypse, landing in our time and dying, but leaving us as much information as they could. That's just what I think. You know what I mean? And
And
what I think is cool is that like we're learning that Neanderthals were with Homo sapiens on the planet with like four other distinct um
hmm
forms of life, right? Like
hmm
there was the small people in the Indonesias. They found a new species in Russia, It's just, and they were interbreeding and all that. And
Yeah,
so
you
when,
had Cro-Magnon, you had
right,
Homo sapien, you had Homo erectus,
yeah, but you
you
had
had
those off skirt like hobbit
mhm.
people, you know.
So even within that realm,
Hmm.
what we understand, like and what we understand might be pushing back about 150,000 years.
Right.
That's and compared to 4.6 billion years of our planet being what it is, that's still something amazing. But even if you just take a step back, just in our portion of the Milky Way galaxy, our star system isn't that old, and in the space of the universe's existence, it has only existed for approximately 1/3 of that time. So, with our finite understanding of time and history, if let's say the world ended tomorrow, that would mean that in the course of that time, there could have been the potential that not just this, but two additional life creating, stars, planets, etc., existed and disappeared from existence. Like we have
Yeah.
no idea what potential civilizations even just existed within this. Now, if you think about that, and now expand that to the fact that you have, hundreds of billions of stars in one galaxy, and then hundreds of billions of galaxies, the
Hmm.
idea that somewhere out there there isn't some form of intelligent life that has figured out things that we haven't, that has flourished and vanished from existence, it's I mean, it is a theoretical impossible that all that has ever existed in terms of life existed on this one little rock.
Agreed. I think that we are within life. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, I think that like what is quantum mechanics is a lot like the universe, studying the universe just on a different scale. Like the
Hmm.
cell rotates just like the universe does. You know what I mean? And I think in that there's a symmetry. There's there's like supposed to be 12 dimensions. Here's a great question for you. I never expected to ask. If there's 12 dimensions and we live within 3 of them, does that mean there's a total of 4 different places to go? Or could the next dimension over to us actually contain 6 dimensions and there might be only be 2 places? You know what I mean? They keep saying that, quantum physics is complete with 12 dimensions. And I'm always wondering, but if we live in 3, like a fish lives in 2. If you pick a fish up, you move him into a third dimension he never knew existed. Could people, could we be picked up out of this universe and be shown like another 4 dimensions? It's so confusing to me, but this is where my mind wanders when I get high on a Saturday night and watch Ancient Aliens. You know what I mean?
So so just to give you an idea, we live in 4 dimensions that we
4.
can four.
Okay.
Time is a dimension.
Time.
So we live on an XYZ axis. That's how we're able to have, 3D spindly noodles.
Hmm.
But then the fourth is time. Now, there's all these wonderful questions, number one, like how, because we're able to manipulate 3 dimensions, how do we manipulate the fourth dimension? That was
Right.
part of Einstein's theory of relativity.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, you couldn't, there were a couple of different ways that you could quote unquote manipulate time. Was number one, you literally fold it so that way you can
Right.
travel faster than the speed of light. Or number two, you punched a hole through the time dimension. Now, of course, this is all highly theoretical,
Right. You wouldn't
but
actually be traveling faster than the speed of light. You'd just be going a shorter distance through time if you folded it.
mhm.
And
So you never actually go faster than the speed of light. You literally fold the dimension of time, or you punch through the dimension of time.
right.
And that's one
And
of those ones where we have absolutely no idea how that's possible.
yeah, where
But
would you go? Where would you end up? That's
well, and
so
that's the grand question,
Stargate, right?
right?
Yeah.
And that's the grand question is we don't know.
You want to hear something weird about time? If you're at sea level it moves at one rate. If you're in the mountains, it moves slower. If you're in space, it moves even slower. The further
Yep.
you get away from gravity, the slower time goes. And in
Yep.
that, you could stay up in space and come back down at a different time.
Yep.
So,
And that's something in and of itself that's absolutely
yeah,
fascinating, which is what lends to the idea of, if we could fold time, what would that mean?
right. God, who sings that song? If we could fold back time.
No, that's turn back time, and that's share. God damn it. So let's see here.
That's so funny.
Looking at some of these other dimensions. Uh, so fifth and sixth are where the notion of possible worlds arise. Uh, fifth dimension, we would see slightly different from our own. That would give us means for measuring similarity and differences between our world and other possible ones. Six would be a plane of possible worlds, where we could compare and position all the possible universes that start with the same initial conditions. So this is where we're getting into multiverse theory,
Right, right.
and that's where it really gets interesting. Seventh dimension, you have access to possible worlds that start with different initial conditions.
Wow. Rick and
So,
Morty.
so this would be like, if the Big Bang wasn't the Big Bang.
Right, right.
Um,
If it
eight,
started because a toaster popped up.
the eighth dimension gives us a plane of such possible universe histories, with different initial conditions, and branches out indefinitely. Ninth dimension, compare all possible universe histories, starting at all the different possible laws of physics. This only says there's 10. So the 10th and final dimension, uh, arrive at the point in which everything possible and imaginable is covered. So
Wow.
so it's not until we hit like the sixth and seventh dimensions, the fifth, sixth, seventh dimensions, that we start getting into multiverse theory. Multiverse theory is really interesting to me.
It is.
I wonder if I'm an asshole in every single dimension. I think,
Some
or there was,
literally.
or one of the funnier ones was, when John Oliver was interviewing Stephen Hawking, and John Oliver asks, "So what you're saying is there's possibly a dimension out there where I'm smarter than you?" And Stephen Hawking replies with, "And a dimension where you're funny." I was like,
Dang.
you know,
Yeah.
that's that, yeah, and I think that's one of the glories of, where we sit on the cusp of science. This is like these, I there's a reason why I love the I don't know, is because, we don't necessarily deal with, finalities.
Right.
And that's one of those things where you could get into any number of philosophical arguments. Like, for example, we talk about in religion heaven and hell often. So the question then would be, are heaven and hell just different planes of existence that fall within one of the, seven to nine dimension, the seventh through ninth dimension,
Hmm.
or sixth through ninth dimension?
Right. Or is it just an abstract of our own being?
Well, and I think many a great philosopher have asked that question. Is it an idea that was simply made up to make, people behave and be good to each other, or,
Yeah.
is this an actual plane of existence? I mean, to tell you,
Mm.
that's like, you know, if you look at multiverse theory, there is nothing that says that the plane of heaven doesn't exist and that the plane of hell doesn't exist. And so that's where it gets really interesting. And then, we also, especially in the Catholic Church, we talk about limbo a lot, or, so that way, where you're sitting there, purgatory,
Right.
another word for it. And that idea of you're just kind of sitting there waiting, like it's just dead space.
Right. Well, I think that's a lot of what existence is. You know, I was thinking about the devil,
Hmm.
and I thought to myself, the thing about the devil is that religion is based on redemption, and the devil is unredeemable. And I don't get that oxymoron within religion that we would give up on a fallen angel because he did something so
It's
bad we wouldn't continue to try and
well,
redeem
and
him.
that's actually where, the difference in Catholic philosophy is versus, I would say, more of the sectarian Christianity.
Right.
It's not that Satan was not redeemable. It's that Satan refused to be redeemed, and that was the difference.
Interesting.
So,
Okay.
the concept was never that, you're completely unredeemable. It's that you had the choice to be redeemed, and people would actively make that choice to not be redeemed. And then that's where you fall in with, Satan, Lucifer,
Mm,
um, Morning Star, however you want to
sure.
put it.
But we're all
But
given those choices every minute of every day on which direction to go.
and
And I think that's the point, you know?
exactly, and that there are people out there that refuse to refuse any type of redemption for themselves. And that's the reality, is that, what the teaching really is about, is that, you can make the choice to do right, to do good, or you can make the choice to do wrong. Redemption is there, you have to seek it. And
Right.
for those that refuse to seek it, there's only one place that awaits you. And that's what the lesson is,
Hmm.
he refused redemption. Now,
Okay. I like that.
that's
That's fine.
and so that's where a lot of people, you know think that, there's this great, the idea of this great other entity besides God, that, there was like this huge battle awaiting. And it's really more metaphorical about,
Right.
the redemption was always there. It's just, if you refuse to take it, that's all there is to it.
Right. There's only so many I told you so's the universe can give you before it just calls your number. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But in every movie, there's a bad guy that goes, "Oh, I want to be good now," and at the last minute, redeems himself and finds salvation. That's what the world is about. You can do
And
that at any time in any sort of way, and that's practicing that in small individual ways is
mhm,
how you begin to do that and begin thinking that your decision can positively affect somebody else if you make it or just yourself. And
mhm,
and then you go on from there to where your decisions help more and more people or harm more and more people.
exactly.
Yep. Well, that's awesome. I love these philosophical discussions. I try and stay away from religion because it's the one thing that I never even wanted to be educated on.
Well, and that's, for me, like, having grown up in the church, and being the kind
Mm,
of person that I am, where, I've read the Bible front to back 3 times, at least the Catholic version of the Bible. And of course, that's where, I have to tell people, it's like, there are multiple versions of the Bible. It's just, every sect has different books included or excluded or whatever have you.
right.
Or, they interpret messages differently. Some are like, some sects, they interpret it like extremely literally, whereas, you know
Hmm.
even within Catholicism, like, we took more of a metaphorical approach, and
Right.
even understood the history behind some of the writings. Like, for example, Revelations, where they talk about the cities burning, it echoes Rome and Rome burning under Nero. Like, it pretty
Right.
much is like, match for match. And even still, in a historical context, when you look at, what was happening in Rome, you can literally put that on a number of different civilizations, where you had a
Uh-huh.
leader who didn't give a shit, and the world was burning around them, and the
Time is
people were left to
cyclical.
exactly. So, it was the understanding that, there were all of these different metaphors for what the end times would look like. And
Hmm.
even still, one of the things that we constantly, had said was, is that you don't know when the end time is, period, end of story. And that's why, you have all these people who try to predict when the end of the universe is, when the end of the world is, when Jesus is going to
Right.
return. And we made it very clear, there's what most people don't understand is that there are multiple ends of the universe.
Hmm.
And the answer isn't just, Jesus shows up. You've got things like, for example, what happens when your lights go out for the last time and you lay down and that's it. But in a sense, that is the end of the universe, because you don't
Exactly.
exist in it anymore. And
Or
or
do you?
or there's any number of different possibilities of what
Mm-hmm.
the end looks like.
Yeah.
It only says that, in the end Jesus will come for you. And so the question is it kind of like the bus where, you have a bunch of souls waiting and one day Jesus shows up and goes, "All right, everybody on the bus." Or is it or is it, more of an individual approach where when your time comes and you expire, you supposedly have, Jesus waiting to take you home.
Yeah.
There's all of these different philosophical and theoretical possibilities behind it, but that was the lesson, is that there was no predictability in what the end was. There were certain signs that, if you look at civilization in general, yeah, that's pretty accurate. If you have great wars, for example, which when you look at the time of Europe and you look at the way that, how Rome was sacked, yeah, the civilized world looked to be falling apart at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at, famine, disease, plagues, you had any number of different, crop failures, and, the Black Death deciding that it needed 3 world tours. The reality is that there were multiple different conditions of the end. Um, and every single time humanity has made it out of that. I'm not saying not worse for the wear, but survived, yes. and
Right.
and of course, you had a number of people that were like, oh, this, especially with COVID, oh, this is the flu, oh, this is the end of the world. And I'm like, yeah, once again, if it is the end of the world, then, here's my bus ticket. Until then, I'm going to keep riding.
It's the end of the world for someone.
It is. And of course, now with the threats of World War III and nuclear holocaust, at this point I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm just going to go with chaotic neutral on this one. I'm either going to, like, you know, get naked and put my ass up in the air and try to catch an atomic bomb, or I'll just walk out naked with a cooler of beer and a hot dog on a stick, and I'm just going to point it towards, the mushroom cloud and see if I can get
Yeah.
myself a nuclear hot dog. The the idea that, the idea of being terrified of the end, especially having been dead twice, just doesn't work for me,
Right.
because I'm not afraid of what happens when the lights go off for the last time. In fact, there's a lot of comfort for me in the fact that at some point this is done and it's over. Yeah, there's this huge looming question of what the fuck happens after that. And the answers that you have to be comfortable with are maybe something, maybe nothing.
Yeah.
And like every other adventure in life, you just have to be willing to accept the fact that there are things well beyond your control, and you're only going to find out once you get there.
Agreed. I think you need to just be able to have the life at the end to where you can take a breath and go. Like when you dive into water, before you shoot a gun or shoot an arrow, you take a breath to calm yourself and then do what needs to be done. I think you need to work towards a life where you don't have these regrets on your head so you can go on. That's it. I think also, I think the problem with religion is that to get the full picture, you need to read all three of the major religions, right? You need the Torah, you need the Bible, and you need Muslims. What is it? The Torah? No, what is it? Oh, the Muslim
Torah,
Bible.
Quran.
Quran, thank you. But I also think we're missing the Mayan version, which I think really goes in with
Well,
that. I think
you also have the Chinese I Ching. You have any
yeah, I
number.
yeah, I get those.
There's
And India
there's
is
so
huge too,
many.
but I
Yeah.
think I think those are telling stories more here. I think the other religions have a different take on it. Like India seems to want to say this is what we saw in the times that we were here, right? Like this is a recording of history. And China's religion is like a recording of history. But like Buddhism, that I think is more transcendent. And I think Jesus has a more transcendent message, and the Quran and the Torah do too. And the Mayans with their calendars, they all seem to have a bigger picture than, say, recording events on Earth, you know? And so to get the full picture, you need information on all of that. And I wish we would update the Bible again. King James updated it what, thousand years ago. Shouldn't we update it now and make it more relative to today's learnings and lessons and morals and characters?
Oh, I mean, there's there's so many things that you could possibly do with it, and that's what makes it so
Yeah.
intriguing and interesting.
Nobody cool could translate the Bible into today's terms because nobody cool puts that much investment into it, you know?
Well, I mean, and the reality is that you're looking at a world that doesn't really have a whole lot of homogenized views anymore.
Yeah.
Like just because you have such a wide and diverse population. And so, like for example, when you think about where the state of some parts of the world are, where women are still considered property versus here where they're
Yeah,
considered
stop
their own
that.
independent functioning beings. um I mean, even like just something just as simple as that, there's no way that you're going to quote unquote have a new Bible that's going to become universal. And then in fact that's
No,
what I would
no, no.
argue, is that all of these new interpretations have been from just looking at the Abrahamic religions, because that's more uh what I have is you have the Old Testament, which Jewish,
Oh, yeah,
Torah.
yeah, yeah.
And then you had the Word 2.0, which included a lot more about how you know being saved and eternal life was a thing. um, and then for Muslims, you had 3.0, because Jesus is a central figure within their work as well. And that's the difference, is that you know there were times in which you could have these 3.0s,
Mhm.
and some would argue that they have 4.0. And
Well, I do. Yeah.
for as much as some of us look at it and go, yeah, no, that's definitely not it.
But I also think that it's like saying, "Oh, I like John Wick 3, but I don't really believe John Wick 1 and 2 existed."
Hmm.
To me, like to get the full picture, you got to see the whole trilogy in its
Exactly.
power and glory. And also spirituality is just one dimension of human existence. It doesn't
Hmm.
answer everything, but it's there to answer like the edges of everything.
I
You know,
think for me, it was always, the way that I looked at it is it was supposed to be a great moral guide on
hmm
how to navigate life in this plane of existence. The idea that, don't kill people, don't be a jackass
right.
and take people's stuff, be kind to one another, look out for each other. Then there's, of course, some of the other ones like don't worship false gods and all of that other stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Right. I think it's there to answer the unexplainable until we explain it. And then spirituality is still the outer edge of that, you know? It's not
And
about disproving spirituality, it's just about proving existence, and spirituality will always be around that.
I mean,
Until you prove the entire like universe,
and that's where some people really look at it and it's like, science explains the how something works. We know how light travels, we know
hmm
we have a pretty good idea of how old the universe is based on the level of tools that we have a great understanding of how certain things exist. Why the Big Bang was the Big Bang, we have no idea.
We barely know how light moves. Like, we just discovered that it has a sound wave and a light wave. Like, it's in two dimensions coming to us. This, what is that? The split theory?
So yeah, light
Yeah,
moves as a particle and as a wave.
right. I mean, we're just learning about this stuff. Like, here's a concept I never thought of. We just discovered dark matter, right? Then that
Mhm.
might prove that we are, in fact, not being held on the earth by gravity, but being pushed down on the earth by dark matter.
Well, that's where it gets interesting, is that from what we can tell, like I said, what we can tell,
Right.
that doesn't seem to be it at all. It seems to be like a great canceller of things that have gone rogue, from what we can tell.
Interesting. But we're
Well,
just
what
learning
there's
about this stuff. I
well
think
no,
it's
so
so
that's
cool.
Well, and so you have matter, you have dark matter, you have antimatter,
Mm-hmm.
which is different from dark matter.
Right. It sucks in matter.
It literally is the cancellation of matter. It
Right.
literally turns it into non-existence.
And it's
It's
out there in the universe, by the way, eating like millions of, I mean, I can't starlight measurements of universe.
so with all of that, just remember there is so much out there that is so fantastic and so beautiful.
Mm,
Don't choose to be a dick. Don't choose
right.
to be a dick to everybody else.
And also, all of that universe and beauty and mystery, it's extrapolated into every cell of you. You know what I mean? You are a part of that. We're all made up of the stardust that came from and through the universe, you know? It's
Hmm.
it's all part of one thing, you know?
Hmm.
So cool. And on that note, so a journalist was killed in Russia or in Ukraine in a Russian attack.
I
I like our
mean,
conversation better, buddy. You know what I mean?
oh yeah.
I like that so much better. But a journalist was killed in Ukraine. So we my question is, it's so weird. I don't know how to segue to this. It was such a horrible segue. Thanks for listening to Public Access America. We started this episode with a new thing, a new series that we're going to be starting the episodes with, and it's called Just the Tip. And what we're going to be doing is just 1 minute quick tips about different aspects of life. This one is on how to create more accessible social media content, and that's just by keeping your posts succinct and to the point for people with cognitive disabilities and reading disabilities. It helps when the point is first and foremost. So, my question about this is, when are we going to stop worrying about hitting Putin's red line and start making him worry about hitting ours? You know, somebody said, "What can we do for Ukraine?" And I said, for some reason, it doesn't make sense to me that we can't put NATO forces just in there to, around a nuclear facility and say, we're not trying to attack you, we're just standing here, don't attack us, and make him worry about confronting us. You know what I mean?
Mm, well, that's where would get fun.
Let's put our asses on the table, you know.
Well, and basically like they're like we've had we I don't in all of the conversations we've never really talked about what our red line is, and I think that's
That's right.
important.
We need to
That's really
start thinking about
important,
that.
and I say that because as you've heard, you have Putin, raising the nuclear readiness of
Right.
his own forces.
He's testing our red line. Did we jump across the Ukraine border when he said nuclear? Did we jump when he attacked the nuclear facility? He's testing our red line.
And now with the most recent potential threat of chemical weapons deployment,
Mm-hmm.
you have this question of if chemical weapons are deployed in Ukraine, is that a red line for anybody in the world? And
Right.
this is where you have the issue of NATO involvement versus what I would say, a general world involvement.
But just really
And
quickly before we get past that, I want to say this is like a child being a brat, asking you where boundaries are. If you don't tell them where the boundary is, they're going to constantly look for it. Okay, sorry.
so there's been all of this conversation surrounding NATO this, NATO that.
Hmm.
And there has to be a point where NATO, in a sense, gets put aside because the world has a general obligation to do something greater.
Right.
And that needs to be the conversation. It's like, get NATO is a defensive clause, absolutely. And the idea is that if you attacked a NATO member, all other NATO members would come to the defense of that nation.
Which happened on 9/11. Right.
But at some point, there has to be there has to be the discussion of what it looks like to go in and defend a people, not because it's a NATO thing, but because
It's a human thing.
it's a European thing, it's a human thing to do.
Right.
And that's And I would argue that the United States has had precedent in doing that, and that precedent needs to be set again if that is something we want to do. Now, I'm going to say this: do I want us to be involved in a war? No, I don't. Nobody should want that,
No.
and that's the difference. But there is a point in which you have to look at two things. Number one is, at what point are you literally foregoing humanity just because you're afraid of somebody else?
Right.
Like, at some point, the world has to decide what is happening in Ukraine is not acceptable. And it's not about taking over Russia, it's about protecting Ukraine.
That's
And
right.
that it's not a NATO coalition thing, it is a world coalition thing. And here's where we saw something similar to that play out. Look at Kuwait and Iraq, Desert Storm. The issue wasn't that we were going to go in and depose Saddam. I mean, there were people that wanted to at that time. But the issue is that it was about getting the Iraqis out of Kuwait. And that is what has to be looked at. And what happened there was you had a coalition of Arab forces that said, we will defend Kuwait and we will go in with you if we can all agree on what the mission is. And that's what
Right.
happened. And sure, there were people who wanted to push into Baghdad and they wanted to take out Saddam. But it was made very clear that the operation was solely to get control of Kuwait.
So, yeah.
Period. End of story. So at some point,
Saddam wanted a land bridge to the coast, the Gulf, so that he could get his oil out and not have to pay Kuwait to do that. And then Iran started hitting Saddam's boats, and then so Saddam started hitting their boats, and we were like, "Oh, you're disrupting oil supply. We gotta step in now."
well, and that, and there was also these undertones that what was happening was Kuwait was setting up oil wells next to Iraq's border, and they were
Right,
horizontal drilling in and sucking Iraq's oil out. There was that
right.
whole issue as well, as part of it. And but
Hmm.
basically, what it boiled down to was
And
after a
weapons of
look.
mass destruction. We throw that in there too,
Yeah, that one didn't really come up to play. But the issue was that
then.
Iraq was broke after fighting Iran for a number of years,
Right,
and so they needed money. And what sells? Oil sells. So that's what happened. They were trying
right.
to recoup their costs that way. Now,
And that land bridge that Saddam was trying to create through Kuwait was also on the border of Iran.
yep. So that's where so having a military precedent like that, where Europe has to agree, not
Hmm.
NATO, Europe has to agree to go in and perform a, well, for lack of better words, we'll just use the Russian term, a special military operation in
Right.
order to protect the people of Ukraine. Period. End of
That's
story.
right. In that
And that's
Iraq,
what and that's where this would be not a NATO thing, but a world coalition thing. Now, do I think China will get involved? No,
I
I
think
do
they're
not think.
actively against us. I think so is Saudi Arabia and Iran.
I think I don't think they would get. The reason why I don't think they would get involved is that we're their biggest trading partner.
But
They're not going to fuck up their bottom
didn't
line
they
for
just get
Russia.
involved? Didn't they just get
No,
involved by creating misinformation about chemical weapons?
did they? No, they're spreading
Like
it. They didn't
I'm
create it.
just hearing, okay, they're just spreading it. They didn't
They're just
create it.
spreading
All
it.
right.
Yeah,
All right.
and even then, there's been a larger question. There's
And
been a
let's not
larger
forget
question
about
of.
India that refuses to um, say that Russia's invading Ukraine.
But
That is a whole
yeah,
mass of the world that is not on our side, you know.
but they're also not on Russia's side either, and that's the other thing you have to
Well,
keep in
they're
mind.
still buying, they still get weaponry from Russia. These are
And
people
they're
like
also still buying stuff from us.
right.
India has a long history of being, well, that's where the term the third world comes from. Is if you were
Ah,
first world, you were aligned with the US. If you were second
woo.
world, you were aligned with the USSR. And if you
Ooh.
were third world, you weren't aligned with any of them.
Okay,
you literally
savages.
just you literally just kind of worked with whoever. And that's something that India has always maintained. They've
Okay.
always they it's not that they're neutral, it's that don't limit who they work with.
I gotcha. Okay.
It's not like
So they
Switzerland or
abstained.
Sweden.
They abstained. They didn't, say they were opposed to Russia's movements or against it. They just abstained from having an opinion.
Exactly. They kind
Gotcha.
of view it as, we're not involved with it, so it's not our thing to really get involved with.
Okay.
Well, whereas, you have, the Russian bloc, and some of the former Soviet republics seeing it as an Eastern thing, and you have, Europe and the United States and its allies seeing it as a Western issue. So that's the difference. It's I mean, it's disappointing to hear what the Indian opinion is on it, just because we do think that there is we do think that there's a pretty clear cut problem in what Russia is doing, but at the same time too, we also have to understand that they have maintained that sense of not neutrality, but abstention from certain things, simply because it does not taking a position on it one way or the other doesn't benefit them in either way. So with so going back to that, we have precedent in creating world coalitions or
Yeah.
large enough coalitions to go in and that way it's not just a US thing going in and squaring off against Russia. It's
Right.
the entirety of the European continent going in and saying this is a problem,
And it
or the
looks like
majority of the European continent going in and saying this is a problem.
Poland is on our side if we were to do that, right? With
Yes.
these airplanes, because they don't want to send the airplanes in, but they want Ukraine to have those airplanes. Republicans want Ukraine to have those airplanes, but nobody can agree on how to get those airplanes there without crossing a red line,
When that's the problem is
That
that
is the
Russia,
problem.
and this is where problem number two comes in, and this one actually worries me a lot more than problem number one. So what we have done with this situation is capitulated to a certain extent
Hmm.
that we're not going to get involved if a nuclear power is involved, i.e. Russia.
Right.
So what we are effectively telling the world, especially the smaller countries and despots of the world, is the United States, if you are a nuclear power, especially a nuclear superpower, we will not get involved if you threaten us. And if that is if that is the line in the sand that people are going to draw, what you're going to see is a lot of countries develop nuclear weapons for the very strategic purpose of, well, the US won't square off with somebody who's got nukes.
Right.
So, and that's an issue in and of itself.
There's a lot of issues leading us to isolationism across the world that way. By weaponizing the dollar, economists say that by weaponizing the dollar, we're actually telling other countries that we can weaponize the dollar, and that would be scary to another country.
I mean, you look at what's happened with Russia's market. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm curious. How much is a dollar? Rubles to dollars.
Yeah, well, because Russia actually offered every dead Russian soldier 5 million rubles, in compensation for the loss of their loved one. And really quickly, while you're reading, right before that Kuwait war, Saudi Arabia was scared that their boats were going to get shot out of the water and their oil was going to go to the bottom of the strait. So they had us put American flags on their ships so they would have safe passage, right? And now Saudi Arabia is not even taking our phone calls. And that's a problem, you know. There's a real separation between good and evil starting. And I think there's going to become a dark economy between this India, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, North Korea, because North
Mm,
Korea's market will suddenly be booming and open in a dark economy. It's not going to be sanctioned in a dark economy.
right. So right now, just to give you an idea, basically the ruble is worth half of what it was. at the beginning of the war, because
It's under is
it was worth about 1.45 cents, and
okay.
now it's worth about point 0.0075 cents. So it's literally about
Right.
half of what it was.
Yeah, it's like
So,
having Starbucks bucks at McDonald's, right?
oh man,
Hey,
I mean,
congratulations to McDonald's for getting out of Russia. That was a big investment they gave up on, you know? And now Putin's like, we're gonna seize all the assets if you leave. That's crazy. That's just crazy. That guy's just attacking everybody. Is
yeah,
he is he suffering from like long hauler syndrome?
there's
Is
been a lot
this
of
like
questions. There's been a lot of
syphilis?
questions. Well, oh, something. There's been a lot of questions, to be perfectly honest. And what they're wondering is he isolated himself a lot during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's questions about his mental health and integrity in that realm.
I think he's just being a brat. I think he's just nobody ever stopped him before, right? Nobody stopped him in Georgia, Crimea, Donbass, like, and then he started attacking countries. I started thinking, like, his cyber attacks nearly took down America, right? 350 million people. It the only reason it didn't take down Ukraine is because they knew it, they recognized it, they saw it on their front line, fought against it, and they were fighting for democracy. They still are because they
Hmm.
recognized it. But places like Moldova, Estonia, these places, they don't have the protection that we have. And a cyber campaign in those countries could decimate those so easily before Putin ever stepped foot in there, you know?
Well, you've also seen the rise too of a lot of the systems that are being used being defended by private entities.
Yeah.
Microsoft actually stepped in and stopped a number of cyber attacks against Ukraine.
Fuck yeah, Microsoft. I like you. If you were more accessible, I would support you because you really do things in this world.
I mean, on a similar note, the current CEO's son just passed away, and a lot of people have said that his son, who I want to say had MS or something like that, um, was the reason why Xbox's adaptive controller got developed. So, because his kid could never play video games due to accessibility issues. And so the adaptive controller got developed as a way to help, people with disabilities
I'm
game.
I'm going to say that corporations aren't opposed to instituting accessibility, but disabled people, they think they all want to be unique and say, I'm the only one that needs this. And if I don't struggle through it, I have no more disabled identity. So they don't want to come together on means of accessibility that could be created for them. You know, it's a real struggle, Jeffrey, in the disabled community.
Well, and
It really is. And
I
it's
can
so
I can only
frustrating.
imagine.
I mean, I don't want to be a jerk. Black people have BLM. They can rally around criminal justice reform and equality, right? Women, they have women's rights movements, women's marches. Disabled people are like, no, I'm special. Sorry, being a disabled person, I can say that. That's me.
I mean, hey, you know what? You're allowed to say that. You have
Yeah.
you have the card.
Right.
But you see that with any number of different groups and
Uh-huh.
organizations. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you look at something as simple as, Occupy Wall Street back in 2011, it started out with one goal, but then it split into two because somebody wanted a different set of goals met compared to the other group.
Oh, yeah.
And then you and that's the thing is that you just watched as all of these groups splintered and splintered and splintered and splintered until there was no longer a cohesive demand or desire or wish list,
Yeah.
and eventually everybody just kind of went, okay, whatever.
I think about that with women's rights because Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton fought for women's rights. But then there was a splinter group from within that wanted a more progressive version of women's rights. And out of those two groups split another camp that was anti-ERA for fear of having a responsibility in the situation. And then from there, Frederick Douglass came in and said, hey, can you put that all on the back burner while we fight for our rights as black people? And that's just within that one issue. And that's why I always say nobody's ever going to congeal on one thing except humanity. It's the only thing we all have in common. Otherwise, we're going to fracture on every single other
Mhm.
issue. Because while I see red as this big, bright color behind us, you see red in a different way. And we're never going to see everything identically. Never. That's the joy of life. That's the joy of having this discussion where we all see things slightly differently, you know?
hmm and that's just it, is that, we all have the same, we all have the same wants and desires, and the question becomes, how do we help each other achieve that goal? Like, for
Or
example,
stay out of the way, you know?
for example, do I need a pair of glasses that if I pick something up and hold it up to my face, it's going to say that it's a can of condensed cream of mushroom soup? No, but I think it should exist because it'll help somebody else like you out there.
But it will also help you. It'll also, if the technology came to a point where everybody was going to use it like text, text was for the deaf. Now we all use text. And I would bet that you would love a tool where you could be taking care of a baby and just mindlessly looking around and getting like what's in your view, you know? Where are
Or
my keys? Keys. Okay, yeah, you know.
or for example, like, at some point, I guarantee you, right now you're seeing what I would argue is the beginning of automation of certain simple tasks,
Yeah,
things that take time that we literally can't afford to spend.
right.
And the ability for machines to read what these things are is important.
Benefits
Why?
everyone.
Well, it has benefited people in being able to, number one, catalog inventory and figure out how much of
Hmm.
something they have. But number two, as that improves, what you're going to have is you're going to have machines that are capable of picking out things for people and having them ready for you to pick up. And
Yep.
that's what I would argue that a lot of, these curbside pickups have become, is it's what I would call the pre-alpha version of automated delivery, automated
Hmm.
self pickup and delivery. And so the answer there is that when the system is able to figure out, hey, if I look at this and I know that this is a Campbell's condensed cream of mushroom soup, the system can go through and go, okay, if I don't have the Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, can I get the Campbell's cream of mushroom low sodium? Will that be an acceptable substitute? Or, hey, how about the store
Hmm.
brand cream of mushroom soup? Is that an acceptable one? And so you'll teach these systems how to recognize what acceptable substitutes are. And you're actually kind of seeing this in memes right now, where, Walmart is like, hey, sorry, we didn't have cream of mushroom soup. How about toilet paper? And it's like,
Right.
what the fuck? But
My personal shopper is great with that stuff, you
mhm,
know. And I and sometimes overboard too, you know. Sometimes they
mhm,
go a little, did you want this or this? It's the same thing. No, one's the generic, one's the, but they're both the same color, but they're different product. I don't care.
put it in
But
the
that's
bag.
but it's so awesome. But it's also annoying because I'm trying to, make my life easier by shopping, not fill the
Mhm.
time I would have spent shopping by answering the shopping questions. But then there's
And
other shoppers that are like, I just substituted it. And I'm like, thank you. So,
mhm,
but I love it. I wanted to say, like, with DoorDash, you spend like 12 extra dollars to get crappy food an hour later. But with Instacart, you just order your food and you make it right there. It's like the reverse of fast
mhm,
food. You're getting the food, making it the way you want, and it's hot and perfect the way you like it when it's ready. And I
right.
like that. So get off of DoorDash, get onto Instacart and eat better because
Mm,
junk
yeah.
food is junk.
And so eventually what you will see, and this, especially as like robot technology improves,
Mm,
you will have robots that will be capable of, number one, going through aisles and picking things out. But I would
right.
argue, number two, that what you would end up having is distribution centers, like, that'll be able to take some of those robots, and it's, you'll have, number one, like, for larger, for larger operations, for example, they'll be like,
Yeah.
all right, flat of this, flat of this, flat of this, package it, gone, next one. And then
Right.
for individuals, you'll have robotic shoppers that go through the aisles, and it's like, oh, hey, we're out of this one. How about this one? Perfect. Grab it.
Yep.
And it'll know inherently, because the thing about data is that each decision gets logged. And what happens is it starts to develop these patterns of, oh, well, when this gets selected, there is a 80% likelihood it is accepted.
Yeah.
Next one is going to be this one. Next one's going to be this one. And as that data builds, all of a sudden these
Hmm.
robotic shoppers become more self-sufficient.
Yeah, it's called
And
reorder points. The world lives on reorder points, and if you want your groceries to be affordable, stay consistent with your shopping so the store knows what they need to buy every month.
and that's where all those little shopper cards come in handy. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
hey, this person buys this. All right, I know that I need to buy it on this schedule.
right,
And the more that you have of that. But with these robotic shoppers, essentially what you will have is you will have a worker that can work around the clock. You'll have someone who's like, yeah, no, just have my order ready for me in 24 hours. So you'll have somebody that's like, yeah, I need it within a couple hours because as soon as I get off work, I'm going to pull up and I need it.
right,
And in people, you'll have that option of 24 hour. If you pick this up in 20, if you choose the 24-hour option, you know your order it'll only cost you say $5 to have your robotic shopper pick this up. But if you choose the 2-hour option, yeah, it's going to cost you a premium because you're going to have to expend a resource in order to make this a priority.
that's silly because delivery is free and priority delivery within the hour is $2 on Instacart. That's ridiculous. Just get it delivered. And also, Instacart, you should be given those discounts you give to pickups to deliveries for people on disabilities too, by the way.
So
So,
there's a number of ways in which I
yeah.
do believe it, we will see things change. And
Hmm.
it's not that you won't see people going into the grocery store to go shopping. I think there will be a new norm at some point of robots coming in doing the shopping for certain groups of people. And yeah, it's not going to be like having somebody like Instacart come in and be like, okay, I'm picking this one, picking this one, and go 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 go.
Right.
But you will have, I would say, 16 hours where these robots are going to be able to fulfill certain orders and have them ready to either A, go out for pickup, or B, go, wait for, say, some sort of final check from, you know, a
Right.
person, or final things that, had to be refrigerated or whatever.
Hmm. I like it. You know, what's really cool is that farms are doing this, where there's certain farms in your community that don't know how much to plant or what to plant, and they don't want to guess. So they take orders in advance for
Mhm,
like meat or rutabagas or carrots, or somebody will order 5 pounds of potatoes at the end of the season, and they'll give you 5 pounds in the course of the season for your order ahead of time. You pay them ahead of time for the potatoes, then they grow what's needed.
mhm.
I love that stuff. I love this world. I have a question about farming, but I'm going to say thank you for listening to Public Access America. We will be back after this song. So here's my question about agriculture. The
Ooh.
right now, the number one producer of wheat is fighting the number two producer of wheat. And the only way out of it, and what the US is doing, is by unrelying on foreign resources and shortening supply chains, which we've talked about, which I find fascinating. But we need to create a new source of a supply chain here in
Mhm,
the lack of wheat, because our grocery bills are going to go up because everything's made with flour and carbs and wheat. So can
mhm.
a farmer in the United States that grows soybeans or corn or potatoes suddenly say, I'm going to grow wheat? Is that possible? Like in the off season to plan and predict, like right now, could they say, we got to put in wheat? No.
Couple of reasons. Number one, the assumption that the equipment for picking potatoes versus picking wheat,
Uh-huh.
they're
Totally
not the
different.
same.
No, 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 no.
Could you have somebody go, instead of planting barley, I'm going to plant wheat? Yeah, you could.
Okay.
That's you have to, if you're going to do that, you have to find similar crops.
Okay.
But on the second side of this too, you know what what we have is an issue with the fact that we can't grow on off season.
Mm.
So so wheat needs warm summer weather in order to grow, ripen, harvest.
Right.
And
Okay.
you can't do that over the course of the winter. Now, if you could come up with a winter crop that you could say grow, harvest, and then, till under, which I wouldn't recommend
Okay.
necessarily, but harvest, down to, stubble or whatever, and then plant wheat, could you do it? Potentially.
Okay.
Realistically, no, because at least with things like barley and durum and other grains like that,
I love Durham.
oats, you have a very similar crop system, you have a very similar planting system, you could do that. But therein lies the rub, is that uh, from changing from one crop to another, you're now creating a shortage of another crop. So
Oh
how do
yeah,
you
yeah,
solve
yeah.
for that?
Right.
How do you solve for that? And this is where, I'm going to go back to my good old favorite, the one that, everybody sees as the boogeyman, but it's really not, and it's genetic modification. The answer is not simply that,
I'm
it's
for it.
not simply to just grow more crop. That's there is that issue, but when you look at the way that supply lines are threatened, when you look at the way that, we're going to be growing food, you have to have the ability, especially in a scenario where, we're looking at how the climate is disrupting certain industries. You have to have the ability to, essentially hedge those issues. You have to have grain in
Agreed.
storage. You have to have not just enough crop to feed you for the year, but to
Right.
feed you for however long, to avoid famines, or with the understanding that you're going to see, the amount of crop that you grow dissipate,
Right.
and that you're going to be eating into your savings, your national savings, while still producing. And so it's a matter of how do you keep that supply line met.
I
that
think people.
and
I think.
that's
I think people forget that wheat and grains is the fuel industry of the body, whereas oil is for the mechanical stuff we build. Like wheat and grains, that's what fuels humanity. And that's going
well,
to be a disruption too in an already inflated economy, you know?
right. Well, and that's where this
Crazy.
gets really interesting. We're growing wheat because it's the one thing that we're used to. But here's the real question: is it the grain that we should be growing? I think that's a better
It's a great
question.
question. Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for that, to be perfectly honest. And that's something that we really need to be looking at. And yeah, does that mean that things would taste different, be different, feel different? Absolutely. But
Hmm.
the question is, would you have the the food sources secured and supplied for you? Like, the
Right.
thing about oats is, like, freaking oats grow like wildfire. Like, that's one of those things.
Right.
It's great, but at the same time too, if that's not what you're looking for in terms of, your food source, that's, going to create some problems. Personally, I love, things like using oat flour and things like that. It has a nice sweet texture to it.
Oh yeah.
But because it's not very glutinous, it creates a denser bread,
Right. Give me
you know.
coconut flour, by the way. It just adds
Coconut.
this moisture. And yeah, it's also gluten free.
Um, Spelt is one of my favorite grains.
Ooh,
It tastes so good to me. I love it.
right. Oh, I don't
So
know.
so the
People,
question, I think that is the question that we have to be asking ourselves. Yeah, it's not that, my family are wheat farmers. There's no question about that. And
so you've
wheat
put
is,
thought into this.
absolutely, because your survival as a farmer depends on your ability to
Yeah,
grow a crop that is going to produce enough crop that is going to have a price that you can sell and survive at.
that's
Now,
right. You could
and
make a
and
penny on corn or a dollar on wheat, right? If
you
wheat's in
could make
demand, if soy's in demand, you know.
yeah, you could make a penny on corn and a dollar on wheat. But on when you look at the per acre, if I'm going to grow a dollar's worth of wheat, then I have to grow a dollar's worth of wheat on the same set of is on the same acreage that I would grow a dollar's worth of corn. And then you have to look at your
Right,
inputs from there.
right.
And that's the difference, is that, as a dryland farmer, you know trying to grow wheat, is never going to work for a
Yeah.
dryland farmer, or trying to grow corn is never going to work for a dryland farmer. You're never going to have the moisture that you need in order to grow a decent crop. But growing wheat, on the
Mm,
other hand, very easy. Now the question is even in those dryland scenarios, are there crops that, number one, fare better, number two, produce more, number three, could at
sure.
least offer a price point that would be competitive to wheat, and
Try cotton.
would provide potentially a more predictable and stable cash crop?
Right.
That is the question that every farmer, if they're thinking about their existence and survival as a farmer, is going to be thinking about. It's not just simply the fact that they're producing wheat, it's that is the crop that I'm producing sustainable? Am I going to be able to continue my operations? Am I going to be able to sell this crop? And that's
Mm,
where you've had so many different fad crops come in different places at different times, and it, they're pain, some of them are great and they make great money, but they're a pain in the ass. Some of them
right.
not so great. Garbanzo beans, one of my personal favorites. You can make a killing off of garbanzo beans. It's
Mm,
fantastic. The problem is that it's a pain in the ass, and more often than not, you have a lot of equipment issues with it.
right.
Because especially as wheat farmers, you're really focused more on your system working for wheat, and so when you have to retool it for garbanzo beans or chickpeas, um, it becomes a pain in the ass.
Mm, I love the chickpea. God bless the chickpea. So
Chickpea is great.
you're saying our dietary desires should be based more on what could be producible instead of producers trying to keep up with the demand of just desire.
I think that's from the consumer side of it. We have to start looking at the expectation of what is going to be able to be produced and be readily
Right.
available.
But we should be happy with an influx of strawberries over oranges one year. We should be happy
Absolutely.
with an influx of avocados over I don't know squash. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
if it's the season for squash, maybe Americans should be getting more squash recipes instead of paying more for potatoes. You
That's
know what I
like,
mean?
like right now, for example, like I mean, we do have those expectations on a small scale. So like, for example, right about now is going to be the peak for asparagus harvest. And you'll see during this time that there's going to be a lot of places, a lot of people are going to be serving asparagus. If you've ever gone to a restaurant and you see on the menu, they will have seasonal vegetables. What they're doing is they're setting the expectation that whatever vegetables you're going to be get during that time frame are going to be freshly harvested vegetables that are grown and harvested during that time frame. So the idea is that by looking at having your dietary needs change with the season, and being able to understand that you're going to meet certain expectations of providing certain foods during seasons, it's something that we've already started to look at least in a consumer realm. Might not necessarily be so much consumer driven as it is, hey, what do I have the ability to access? But the expectation is there by restaurants saying, quote unquote, and seasonal vegetables.
Right.
So then the question becomes, we don't necessarily think of wheat as a seasonable as a seasoned
Right. A
seasonable.
seasonable commodity.
Exactly. And the reason why is because we can generally grow it more than enough to serve, to
Sure.
feed us throughout an entire year.
It's a
But
biblical it's a biblical stock, you know. We're always gonna have it. I
but the
mean, it's
question
what killed the
becomes,
Egyptians, isn't it?
but the question then becomes is if wheat or any number of crops becomes less than sustainable,
Hmm.
what is the suitable replacement for it? And
Exact like
that's
the banana, right? We need to have a wheat crop that's similar to the banana.
or and that's in the past what we had done was we looked for different plants, different uh,
Hmm.
we looked at different replacement plants that were pretty much within the same family. So like the banana that essentially went extinct because of the fungus, now you have a different banana. Bananas supposedly in the 1950s tasted much different. They're much
Oh yeah.
sweeter, I guess,
Oh yeah.
um compared to the bananas that we have now the
Wait,
question.
wait, sweeter more sooner. Like you didn't have to let them age like you do these. They didn't have to get quite as yellow to be as sweet. but they, whatever.
And so
Anyway.
and so that there comes the question is that, you know, we have all of these, we have all of these crops, currently.
Hmm.
Genetic modification, genetic engineering is doing things like making them fungus resistant.
Right.
And how do we do that with, say, bananas, for example? Could we bring back dead varieties that, worked in hardier times, but, for whatever reason, um, they, essentially went close to extinct because
Right.
they just weren't viable given a certain time frame,
Because of the
a
fungus.
certain
Right.
climate. So could you genetically engineer some of these old varieties to be hardier and
Yeah,
bring them back?
to grow in our region or even Mexico's region would reduce the
Hmm.
supply chain. That would be so cool. And then, yeah, like your local community farmers are going to have shipments of whatever grew best in your area at the time. Support that. Find out what your local commodities are and support that so that your local farmers know what to grow. And in Florida, we have over 86,000 farms because we have a great season for it. You know what I mean? And so I
Hmm.
really love saying do that. Like going to a farmer's market is one thing. They're trying to figure out what you're going to buy so they know what to grow on a small scale. But if they could know what their community is going to buy and grow for that, you would have more diversity in the farms because farms could be covering different things.
Hmm.
How do you feel about biofuels? Like growing food specifically for fuel instead of to feed people?
I think, unfortunately, like, I think the promise of it was not as good as we would have wanted it
It's
to be
not where it
perfectly honest.
should be by now, but it could be, or we should give up on it
I
and
think
just,
I think we should give up on it and move towards different technology.
yeah, me too.
I think the idea of crops as fuel, was a neat idea
Hmm.
up until the point where, we really started seeing the advancement of different renewable technologies, and and even the advancement of electric technologies.
Right.
So really, at the time, if, let's say, the world stopped at, essentially 1996 level technological advance levels, I think it would be a great idea. But
Right.
in 2022, I don't think it's a great idea, and the reason
We
why
don't,
is
yeah.
is that we have better technology for, electric vehicles that's going to allow us to use food, arable land that we're using for fuel as for food. And
Yeah.
that's the difference, is that I think that in the 90s it was a novel idea, but I think it unfortunately is going to go by the wayside because, with the advent of better electrical technology and the advent of, better
Yeah.
better power storage and batteries, it's just not going to be the same. And I would argue too that as we look at different combustion technologies,
Yeah.
that also goes by the wayside. Like, for example, looking at, hydrogen combustion engines, for example.
Hmm. Geothermal, like desalinization. Like these are multi-pronged purposes that come from nature. I love it. We got to stop burning things for our fuel. It's antithetical to what we're trying
I
to
mean, if you think
accomplish.
about it,
You
if you
know?
you think about it this way, we are concerned about rising ocean levels, but if you were to,
Yeah.
number one, desalinate ocean water for arable, for arable farmland, so that way
Yeah.
you, like they do in Israel, and number two, use nuclear power to not just desalinate, but to create liquid hydrogen, so that way you can have
Yeah.
hydrogen combustion engines. Suddenly, every place on the coast is prime real estate for essentially hydrogen refineries that allow
Uh-huh.
you to ship liquid hydrogen off to, hydrogen combustion engines. The reality is that until you're able to produce enough electricity at a constant level that is going to constantly supply, you're still going to have the need for some type of a combustion engine. Now, the thing
You're
that
always
the
going to have a need for gas and oil. It's to reduce it to a point of
not
luxury and not necessity.
not necessarily anymore. And that's the thing, is that for now, yes, for the foreseeable future, yes, gas and oil are definitely going to still be a need,
Do you know how
and
many
especially in
oils?
heavy industries. But with the when you look at, different combustion engine types, like, for example, hydrogen combustion. Remember, we've developed battery technology and electric motor technology. And so at this point, what you're looking at is you're not even looking at these combustion engines being direct drive shaft propellers of your heavy
Right.
equipment. You're looking at them being
Chargers.
what turns a generator in order to charge your battery. And
Right.
so you still have the glories of the combustion engine keeping you powered up and keeping you going, but now
Mm-hmm.
you have something that's only burn off as water and water vapor. And yes, you will still need, some level of petroleum products in order to keep
Right.
the engine lubed up and working. But even
Sure.
still, there might be some places where that might not necessarily be the case anymore. Like, especially if you can
Right.
figure out, like, graphene in a lot of cases is a better lubricant.
Or,
And
or
so
plant-based oils, or even like an
exactly.
avocado extract. There's all these things. Coconuts.
There's
Coconuts, they make pesticides out of coconuts. Like,
mhm.
you can do amazing things with plant-based products. Yeah, I'm just saying that there will always be a portion of the population that uses a petroleum product, either in their preservatives for their foods or for a luxury item that they own. You know
I
what I
think, and
mean?
and that's this was a thought that I was looking at, yesterday. It's, people wonder. It's like, well, you just want, petroleum to go away because it's evil. No, not
No,
necessarily.
no, no.
Because there's, when you look at, I want single use petroleums to go away. I want, here's what I want.
Right.
I want things that are going to be rough, rugged, and stick around for a while. Like, for example, as a shooter, like, there's a lot of pieces of my rifle that are polymer. Like, I need
Hmm.
rough, tough plastics. I want, like, I was bringing in my groceries the other day, and rather than having, like, a bunch of plastic bags, I've got these giant,
Totes.
plastic
Yes.
totes that are collapsible, that I literally just pop up, push out, and then I throw all my groceries in, haul them inside.
Yep.
And so I'm not using bags to haul things back and forth, single use bags. I'm using
Yep.
this rough tumble plastic, and one day it's going to break, and my expectation is that I send that off to be recycled, and I pick up another rough tumble plastic thing that I can haul my stuff around with. And
Recycling's
that's
dead, Jeffrey. Nobody does it anymore. Sorry.
uh, and that's what's so funny is like, there's some of these, what I'm calling, modernized old ways. Like, for example, uh being somebody who can't have milk, or
Right.
have it, I can only have it, like, very sparingly in certain things.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bummer because, when I finally found something that I liked, which was Costco's oat milk, the packaging was entirely
Ah.
recyclable. Like, the cardboard case, break it down, recycle it. When I was finished with the milk, I could rinse out the carton,
Uh-huh.
fold it flat, recycle it.
Right.
But then they stopped taking that as recyclable.
Right.
So now it's like, this thing that, I bought that was going to be recyclable is no longer recyclable. So I ended up spending a couple $100, and I got myself some glass jugs and something that I can make my own milk with. Now I got to figure out my recipe and
Right.
get it right. So that's what I'm going to be tuning with later today, is trying to figure out if I, trying to figure out what my recipe is.
I love
But
that. I love
but
that, Jeffrey.
but essentially now it's like I've got a self-contained system where I will literally be able to make my own oat milk, my own rice milk, my own
Yeah.
coconut milk if I want, and that's perfectly fine, and that way it's like,
It's more than fine. It's so
I'm
much more
using
than fine, man.
I'm using these glass jugs that are, going to be completely reusable. Well, why glass jugs? It's like, think about what your grandparents used to do for milk. Your great grandparents, they had a
Oh my
milkman show up
God.
with glass
Yeah.
jugs.
They still do. It's called Oberweis in Chicago. The
It's
best.
Smith
Oh,
Brothers. It's Smith
mm,
Brothers out here.
I love it. Sorry. I
It's
know you don't do milk, but my morning is based on it.
I
And I tried the
God,
Fairlife stuff, which was like I tried the oat milk creamers, I tried the almond milk, I tried the all of the milks, and I can't do it. It's just natural milk within reason. I can't have a whole lot, but I can have like a cup a day.
dude, like, you have no idea what I would do if there was
Yeah.
something I could do in order to have, actual milk again.
Right. Like I can't have pasta, you know? It's
Hmm.
like deadly for my body. But I found these little $1.39 packages of fiber, like pumpkin fiber. It's like condensed pumpkin fiber. I
Hmm.
put that in my homemade pasta sauce, and I
Hmm.
was like, well, I want some pasta. Holy cow, the pasta didn't stay long enough in my body to have an effect. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I got to eat pasta and bread, and it just went whoop, bye. And I was
Um,
like, fuck yeah.
the pasta that I found that's actually been really great is chickpea pasta.
Ah, I like the
Banza.
Durham. I like the
Banza.
Durham.
Oh, I love Durham too. Don't get me wrong, but this
Yeah,
Banza, this Banza is a chickpea pasta. It's actually really great. But man,
it is
when it
actually.
says when it says cook it for 8 minutes, I mean, like at 8 minutes, you pull that motherfucker out.
Right. Yeah, because that pasta I made was like mashed potatoes, not quite mashed. It like cooked instantly. Like the water
Hmm.
wasn't even boiling at a full boil yet, and the pasta was done. And I was like, I don't know what to, I don't eat a
Hmm.
lot of pasta, so I'm not very good at. I make homemade pasta a lot.
Mm.
You know, if I'm gonna eat pasta and make a homemade sauce, like here's a breaking news for you. Warming up pasta sauce that comes out of a jar and pasta that's pre-made isn't cooking, it's warming.
Which
You
case,
know?
I warm a lot of stuff up, and that's
Well,
perfectly
yeah,
fine. I
that
don't
is
have enough
perfectly
time.
fine. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things is like, there are some things for convenience. Oh yeah, when Debbie sits down and makes a homemade pasta sauce, it's
Yeah.
fucking incredible. But when you are limited on time, you have to do what you can. And I'm not saying I go out and get ragu, but at the same time, I'm also not, spending a premium on something that has something in Italian that I can't pronounce either.
Right. I bought I bought 10 big cans of tomato sauce because I was
Hmm.
gonna make tomato pasta sauce. It was 2 for 1, and instead of buying me 10 and charging me 5, she got me 20 and charged me for 10. So I had 20 jars of pasta, like tomato sauce. So I have to learn how to make, and I got mason jars, and yeah, I just make sauce. I put it in my cabinet, or I had it in my fridge actually. And
Hmm.
yeah, when I wanted pasta, but then I stopped eating pasta because it hurt my body. So I wanted to make chicken, whatever. I don't know. I don't know. I like the sauce, hate the pasta. But I love that you made oat milk. That is so cool. We need to do that. That's how we
Oh.
get rid of these preservatives and additives into our
Mhm.
stuff, because it's just they put it in the stuff to make it last longer until it gets to us, but we don't need that stuff in it if we make it at the point of us,
Hmm.
right? Like, I don't know
Exactly.
why people want ready-made things. I understand if you're at work and you're having a lunch, you want something you can just heat in the microwave, but you can't live your life like that on the go like that. We weren't built for the fast food was made for fast moments, not for every moment. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Well, and I think one of the other things too that we have to look at, is that there are certain things that work as preservatives that we've kind of lost touch with, like for
Yeah.
example salt or citrus. Those are things that do great at killing bacteria or inhibiting its growth, and then when you cook it,
Right.
everything goes away and you're left with a perfectly good thing. I think that some of that is starting to come back into some of that mentality. There's some stuff you can get at Costco that's absolutely great. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it is amazing, and it has next to no preservatives in it. Or they're moving towards things like sea salt water, or
Yeah.
using citrus as a way of preserving things, and it's fantastic.
It is. Instead of falsifying it by like adding a carb and calling it light because you removed a sugar, just give us a little less of the organic product, you know?
Right.
Like there's ways to do it. And I love that we're starting to pay attention to our food again, you know?
Hmm.
Like I really honestly think that McDonald's, there's that commercial. Oh, when was the last time you were in a drive-through? When was the last time you bought a fresh fruit or vegetable through the drive-through? I don't go to drive-throughs. I order Instacart. So I just throw oranges in there. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's kind of
I'm
like all I can think of now is that one time that somebody at a grocery store did that, where they packaged fruit like they did meat,
right.
and then somebody added a boneless sticker to it. I'm like, I mean, that's what I think of when I think of like drive up, like that fast food fruit and
Yeah.
vegetables. Like, hey, is this banana going to be boneless?
Right. But I think McDonald's would have healthier stuff if they realized that we are leaning towards healthier products, you know?
Like, and I think that's, that's one of those things where, uh, yeah, they definitely tried at one point, but they really did a bad job of it.
They
And
really did a bad job putting 76 ingredients into a vegetarian burger so you could say it was a vegetarian burger, but defying every other law of nutrition to do it was gross. Burger
like,
King, just gross.
that's one of those things like the Impossible Whopper, and
Oh,
Impossible or beyond. Like, if you look at it pound for pound, that stuff usually has more things that are worse for you than a fucking hamburger.
yeah, just
And
eat
I'm
the
not saying that,
hamburger.
the hamburgers at, I'm not saying that the hamburger at, McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's or wherever is any better. And that's
Right.
the thing, is I'm talking about what I buy from a grocery store versus, buying, Beyond or Impossible. And that's the real honest truth.
Uh-huh.
And so, the thing is that, do I want plant-based options to be available for people? Absolutely. Like, there's some really great, plant-based options out there that taste good. And when I'm not in the mood for a greasy ass burger that's gonna, make me shit
Right.
myself later, maybe I'll try something that's, a vegetable
But
and go that route.
that's the important thing to understand. That big greasy burger isn't your only option every day now
Hmm.
anymore. Like you could have a meatless Monday, and see how that goes. Because I'll tell you, once you start realizing the different things you can use in a meatless meal, you're gonna want more days to try meatless products.
For me, I recognize that, like, I go in phases. Like,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't ever go like completely meatless, but there will be days where I'm just like, I need some fucking plant material in my stomach. Like, I need
Right.
something like that, and then that's what I'll do, is I'll get something like that in my system.
But I'm the opposite way. I'm like, I want a burger right now. Like, I just want a pound of bacon right now, and you're not going to stop me. I don't, I don't, there's what is that? Definitions don't exist. Absolutes don't exist. So I'm never
Hmm.
going to say I'm never going to, and I'm going to enjoy it when I have it, right? I'm not going to
Hmm.
kill myself because I'm eating what's available to me, but I do want it to be the best version of what I could be eating. I went to
Absolutely.
Cracker Barrel, right? And
Hmm.
I was looking at the menu and I was like, I really want a hamburger. I really want a hamburger. Maybe I should get the chicken fried steak. And the lady came to the table and she's like, what can I get you? And I was like, could I get the grilled chicken salad? you know? And the lady set it down and my friend looked at me. And I'll tell you, his thought wasn't like, that's weird. He started asking me about what he's eating now. Like, he's telling me like, is this good? I had frozen pizza and I have to tell him, well, that's got a fruit, that's got a cheese, that's got a, it's got all the ingredients that you would want for a balanced meal. And he's like,
Hmm.
I don't believe you. And I'm like, no, it's true. You get everything you need in your balanced meal. The only thing you're getting in addition to that is the additives and preservatives that they put in there to make sure it was fresh when it got to you.
Hmm.
And he likes that. But, like even the waitress was like, you're ordering a salad? Like in Florida, Pensacola, you're ordering a salad? It was delicious. It was great. And my body
Well,
felt amazing.
and that's one of those things, like, we all just have to recognize where we're at too. And
Uh-huh.
some people, they're going to want more plant material. Some people are going
Oh
to
yeah.
want more meat. And sometimes you're going to fluctuate. You're going to go through stages where you're like, oh yeah, I need some more plant material. Oh, I need some more meat.
Right.
And that's just part of, the way the human body works, is
I'm
all
putting
over the
them
place.
together right now. Like I'm having a salad and frozen burritos, or like a salad and pasta, and I'm combining it now. And it's so cool.
Hmm.
It's just so cool to it's not that I have, and it's not that I've reached an age where I need more of this stuff. It's just that my body has always needed this balanced diet, and I've never taken the time to do it because I've always used fast food as a crutch to get through the moment. You know what I mean? And I finally have the time to make that better, to make my diet better, to make myself. I'm in a relationship with myself. I'm self dating, and so all of the joy that I would give onto a partner, I give unto myself. And my diet is one of those things.
Yeah, or me being the smartass that I am, I'm in a relationship with myself and tend to go fuck myself a lot.
Oh, I do that. I do that too. I do that. Well, not nutritionally, just in every other way possible.
I mean, that's pretty much me in every possible way. So,
Right.
but I mean, the reality is that we have to be more open about the fact that like this weird fucking like this weird time where you have people screaming at each other to eat more plants or eat more meat and this, that, and the other.
Right.
It's like, how about y'all listen to what your body's screaming for and you just go with that. And if for you it's
Yeah,
more plants, go with that. If it's more meat, go with that. All I can say is that everybody's body has a different equilibrium point and you have to figure out what yours is, and
that's
you have to be
right.
smart and healthy about it.
That's right. Yeah, you're not me and I'm not you. We have different dietary systems. Why would I judge you for how you're eating? Why would you judge me for how I'm eating? You know what I mean?
It'd be like you telling me to have more milk. Oh, fuck you.
Right.
That's gonna hurt.
Right. Yeah, my buddy's telling me that, my friend's telling me that I'm gonna die because I drink too much milk. And I'm like, oh, that's the guy with leukemia.
Right. It's or or you got the vegan who tells you that you need to eat vegan because it's the healthier option, yet they're absolutely miserable. They're literally eating fucking Lay's and Oreos. And
Right.
it's like, look, you can tell me to eat vegan all you want, but you're not convincing me that this is the better option. What you're showing me is that you're miserable by eating vegan. You're not getting
Right.
any better. And I don't know that it's necessarily the vegan diet so much as it is the quality of what you eat. And that's the difference.
That's the I made biscuits one Thanksgiving and my friend was like, these are great. And he had another one. These are great. And he had another one. He's like, these are great. The next day, he's like, I finished those rolls, a whole cake pan full of rolls. And I was like, I'm so proud of you. And he was like, why? And I was like, because those are the gluten free. I didn't have any like regular flour. So I used my gluten free. And he was like, really? That's gluten free? He was like,
Yeah.
I got to try more gluten free. And I was like, yeah, it's not depriving you. It's just a different version of something.
And that's one of those things, like, for example, like, Debbie got me this Nordic baking book. And one of the things about it is that, they used a variety of different flours, different
Yeah.
grains, and it's you made different breads based on what you had available to you, and
Yeah.
that's where a lot of this comes from. It's not that you shouldn't have. I mean, for some people, it's you shouldn't have gluten, period. But it's the idea. There's also the idea there too that it's like you know you can branch out and you can do different things. Now, this is where I'm going to caveat all of this. Especially growing up with, especially like living with people who have, certain mental needs around their food. For example, like texture is a big issue, taste is a
My
big
gosh.
issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's another one of those things where call it what you will, but in a way, if for those of us who have who like to have diverse palates, who choose to have diverse palates, you know um we can't single out and we can't deny the fact that there are people out there that have issues with any number of things. Like, for example, like, I can understand why some people would have issues with certain gluten-free things. Like, the texture can be sandy, it can be coarse, like it can taste drier than any number of
Sure.
things.
Sure.
And for me, like, I can be like, okay, this isn't what I expected, but I'm okay with this, or I'm good with this, or, oh, hey, this actually turned out to be awesome. But that change in, this is what I'm used to, this is my thing, and you get something new in there, and it completely can derail a person. And so
Oh, agreed. Agreed.
for some people, it's like you literally have to set up the expectation. Hey, I didn't have this, it's going to be this. And then
Yeah.
they'll try it, and if they have it, great, and if they can't have it, great. And that's what it boils down to, is that everybody, like you said, my body's not yours, your body's not mine, and the
Yeah.
idea that we have to tell each other what to do with them is just absolutely insane.
But that's also the point of what I'm trying to get at. I love this whole hour about making your own food, knowing what's in your own food. Every baker can counter for that drying grittiness in their gluten-free meals. I've been to bakeries where they make eclairs that would blow your mind
Hmm.
if you counter for it, if you put thought into it, if you've made it 4 or 5 times. Every time the first time you make something, it's going to be gross because it's
Oh,
not
absolutely.
tailored for you. It's a general recipe that somebody else made for them. But if you find a simple recipe like a banana bread recipe and make that in your parameters, it will be so amazing and it'll be unique and other people will be like, that's amazing. You know what I mean?
My
It's
personal
different.
favorite was somebody made the point of adults aren't picky eaters. They only buy the things that they like to eat and
Right.
then complain that their kids are picky eaters. And I sat there for a second. I was like, yeah, that's actually pretty accurate. I buy the things that I want to eat. And then if somebody doesn't want to eat that, it's like, what are you, a picky eater?
Right.
Wait, what am I
Yeah.
doing?
We all want different, we all want a variety, but we make that. We don't spend the time making it. And that's why I'm saying when you go to Burger King or McDonald's, you're buying somebody else's version of flavor and you want your own and you can do that. Like I can my own chili beans. I think it's an amazing thing because I can add the spice I want. Hey,
Hmm.
do you know I tried making this new recipe? I filled my deer meat with pickles, but all I got was dildo. Ah,
I did that to Emily one time. Emily makes
you
these.
filled Emily with dildo?
Yes. No.
I love you, Emily. I'm sorry. She's one of my favorite people that I don't know.
So Emily would make these dill biscuits, and they were absolutely amazing. And so we were over there one time, and she was with an ex and his kid, and we're all sitting there, and I'm just kind of, my brain is churning because I see dill biscuits, and of course I'm going dildo, dildo,
Dildo,
dildo,
dildo,
dildo,
dildo.
and so we're sitting there, and I was just like, "Hey, can I try your dildo?" And the kid snickers, and Emily's just like, "Oh!" Everybody starts laughing, and then they're like, "Wait, look at the kid. What do you? How do you know what that is?"
Right. That starts a whole nother conversation. Yeah.
Oh, it was so funny.
So should that be dill comma dough? Or just should there be a
Dodil.
pause in there? No, no, no
It's
space.
we go with the European standard and call it dodil.
Dildo, dildo.
Dodil.
Dildo. Man, I had a lot in my note and I don't think we got to any of it other than the wheat thing. I think that's so cool. Hey,
Hey.
did you know that five West Point graduates, including two football players, died from fentanyl? Let's see.
Okay.
Wait, that's in Fort Lauderdale. Let's see.
Yeah, and so yeah,
Fentanyl
they were on
laced
spring break. Yeah, it was
fentanyl laced
cocaine,
cocaine. Yeah, 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 yeah.
cocaine laced with fentanyl. Now, this is
Damn
where,
boy. Damn boy.
yeah, so this is where like the underground market is really something terrifying to me when you think about
Yeah.
like because right now it's like it is a dangerous time to be out buying street drugs. You've
Right.
got you've got you've got everything being laced with fentanyl, and
Yeah.
that shit like even in a hospital setting, just to keep this in mind for people, that shit is hard to control in a hospital setting, having the proper drugs and the proper staff,
Right.
let alone on your own, not knowing the quality of what you're getting. Like, and
Oof,
that's what's terrifying is that
bad.
that stuff is fucking potent to the point where it'll collateral damage officers like that are having to deal with it.
Yep.
So this is what people need to understand is like this is like one of the most dangerous times, especially as kids, like growing up we always heard the horror stories of, oh, weed laced with PCP, weed laced with any
Uh-huh.
number of things. PCP was it.
Right. Wiki
but
stick. Mm. Loved wiki stick.
but now
Yeah.
having stuff laced with fentanyl, like I've like out here I've heard of street weed being laced with fentanyl. I've heard of
Oh, yeah.
fentanyl is a huge problem out here,
It's a
and
it's a huge problem everywhere. That's
it's
kind of my
terrifying. That's
point.
terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
this is where one of those things where it's like, as much as I don't like the idea of necessarily having a bunch of government regulation, there are times and places where it is somewhat important. And at least out here in the legal weed market, you know your weed can only contain weed, no pesticides, no other things. Like
Right.
that's That's one of the great things about like having this service out here is that you know I'm never going to have to worry about going into a store out here and worry that something I'm picking up is going to be laced with something else.
Right. This is the biggest call for legalization of all drugs, is just to stop this. Legalized cocaine would fix this. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It
I
would
mean,
stop this instantly. The only reason these kids from West Point died is because you made cocaine illegal and enticing and dangerous all at the same time.
and it got and then it get cut with something, and that's
Yep.
the problem. You know, all of those
Well, who did
things.
the cutting? That's the issue. It's always going to be cut, but can you trust the person and what they're using to cut it with?
I mean, in
Cocaine
the
is a very strong, strong fucking drug, you know?
well, and that was the thing too,
Oh,
is that
that's
you had,
crack. Sorry.
well, even back in the day, you had what was it that was always what was
Baby laxative?
there were people that would lace cocaine with liquid plumber.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Like that's like you think about that, that's fucking insane right there.
yeah. I think that's what led to crack, was that they started throwing all this weird stuff in cocaine. So you wanted to cook it out and make it pure and just have cocaine again. And then people were like, I don't want to cut this rock up. It's too hard. Just smoke it. Holy shit. I can't feel my body. Give me more.
Yeah, and so like you think
Yeah.
about where drugs are at. Like this is actually like, everybody was like, oh, this is a scary time back in the day, and it's like
Yeah.
apparently it's child's play compared to shit laced with fentanyl these days.
Right.
It's like
Fentanyl on its own was made to be strong. Heroin on its own was made to be pure. You put those two together, you got strong as pure. That's
mhm.
bad.
And
Oh,
meanwhile, people who fucking smoked opium or used opium never, got
yeah,
most of the same effects and
right.
none of this shit.
Right. They
You'd end
wrote
up
books
asleep.
like Sir Conan Doyle did, you know?
Right. So that's what's crazy about it is that,
Yeah.
is it is a weird market right now in underground drugs because
Yeah.
it is a deadly market in underground drugs. And you look at when you look at especially opioids in and of itself,
Hmm.
we're not not looking at like cocaine or weed or anything, but you look at the opioid epidemic and how it played into the rise of heroin usage.
And terrorism.
That's it's absolutely wild how now this has changed to people just trying to get their fix from anything, and that includes fentanyl.
Well, what's the guy's name? We killed him. Al Qaeda.
Bin
Wait,
Laden,
no.
Bin Laden.
Bin Laden. Bin Laden's money came from opioid fields, like the
Mhm.
opioid crisis here.
Opium, yeah, yeah. He was a
Opioid crisis here was funded, 9/11. That's what funded 9/11.
yeah, Poppy.
Kind
Yep.
of, in a way, you know what I mean?
Oh
Poppies,
yeah.
because that's where they grow, and that's who harvests them, is terrorists. That's who takes over the lands that they're on. That's the trade, unless you're drilling for oil. You know what a cool new invention is, Jeffrey? It's so
What?
cool. There's a pillow, a hugging pillow that has a bladder in it that inhales and exhales like a real person. And it's supposed to use to cure anxiety, especially in like students with anxieties. I think
That's an
this is so
interesting one.
cool, isn't
I
it?
j-
And then when you think about it breathing next to you, don't you think that's a little creepy? Could have put
that's
that in
where my
something.
brain went initially.
Yeah,
I'm like, this makes me feel uncomfortable.
right. Well, my initial thought was, does it have a vagina? But that's me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
If you can combine the two, I don't really need to date ever again.
perfect. I mean, I'm sure you could probably shove a flashlight in that thing.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I got you. Something to have, something to hold. But I think that's such a cool idea. And my friend Katie Anderson had that on Twitter. And I told her, I was like, I don't know if it's a hugging thing, but if you put that in a teddy bear, I'd be all over that shit, you know?
Yeah, then suddenly the teddy bear just like grabs you and holds you and never lets you go.
I'm okay with that. Oh,
The
Jeffrey.
clingy teddy bear.
So I don't know if you know who this is. One of my favorite people on the planet, and my personal friends, Haley Bieber, was hospitalized. She suffered a blood clot and in her brain, and
Hmm.
she was taken to the hospital. And it was more of a bigger deal than it sounds. Her body passed it on its own. But I wanted to throw that story in to say I never had reason to feel compassion for Justin Bieber, but I know what it's like to have your spouse in the hospital with a brain condition. And I
Hmm.
really feel for him. And man, I hope he just understands the love that he has. And I hope they realize that could have been a lot worse. And I want to say to Haley, congratulations on surviving it. You're a beautiful person, I guess. I didn't know you existed until this story.
You know, this, in the past 2 weeks, I've known three people, that have had to bury people, thanks to COVID. And you don't really think about how lucky some people are to survive, and how lucky some people are that, they just barely escape with their life, if you can consider it lucky. you know I think one of the things that we're going to have to address in this country is how do we get enough healthcare providers, um, post COVID, because that's really a huge problem for all of us at this point, is the lack of sustainable healthcare. And unfortunately, what you saw during the pandemic burnt out a lot of people in healthcare, and it's really unfortunate that that's what we're going to be dealing with for the foreseeable future. And you know and that's, one of the things that we have to really think about too, is we may not necessarily like certain people, but you can still be empathetic and compassionate towards, hard times, and
Yeah.
very stressful situations in a person's life. We can go back to shitting on Justin Bieber later, but it's, there's enough, there should still be enough humanity there, that when somebody has to deal with something terrifying, a crisis of sorts, that, can put aside being an asshole long enough to say, hey, you know
Yeah.
hope your other part gets better.
It's it's one of the scariest things when your spouse is hospitalized. Like I feel for anybody that goes through that. I feel for anybody that gets into a relationship because I know there's going to be a point when that is a situation, and I feel so much empathy for both of them. I'm so glad it was just a simple thing for her. But like I said, I don't really know much about them, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I'm happy to know that I have something in common with him. Let's see. Hey, San Francisco's first tiny home village for the homeless people is open, with each home costing about an average of $15,000. What they did was they had a park that they turned into a homeless sanctuary where people would be safe, like a
Hmm.
sanctuary city for homeless people. And they then turned that park into a tiny home village with electricity and cabinets and a dining room. And I think it's really neat. I think it's a great idea. I
No,
can't
that's
wait to see how that goes.
it's fantastic, and
Yeah.
that's, I mean, I personally would like to see things done a little bit differently. I think one of the things that, people are going to have to embrace are things like, high-rise villages, and things like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And better construction, more solid construction for things like that. It's like, yeah, it's going to be fucking concrete, sure, but um, soundproof the shit out of it, and then, make
Yeah.
sure that you have enough space for people, make sure you have enough services within that
Uh-huh.
building, however you decide to do it, so that way, your services are located in one part of the building, away from people who can get in, and locked down really nicely. And then that way,
Right.
it's, you're better, like those central services, whether you decide to go with the tiny home model, or the high rise apartment model. There's definitely a way to do it.
Or transition. That I think the tiny home duplex is a start. I don't think it should be considered storage. I like your idea that it should be inclusive, that it should meet the needs of the people that are using it. But I do like your idea of even then transitioning to a more permanent high rise, or
Hmm.
a community with the stores. I mean, you know, I just think that's neat. If you meet people's needs where they are, you're going to find little
I mean,
communities like this.
you think
But
about you think about that. You have the living facilities above, and let's say you have the
uh-huh.
food bank. You have the food bank down on the first floor,
You have
even.
a post office that also is your bank account. You have the Walgreens, which is also your urgent care. You have the grocery store, which is also your medical needs, pharmacy, whatever. You have stores that could double as things. You have institutions that could double as things. Your
Mm.
post office could be where you sign up for your Medicare or your Obamacare, or you have somebody that helps you signing up for what it is you need, because you
Mm-hmm.
don't know, and you don't know how to sign up for it. But having somebody there that helps you, that changes everything.
Having the technology there that people
Uh-huh.
need in order to sign up for some of this stuff.
Right. And I want to say I'm really happy with whatever community this is in, because in Florida we chase the homeless people out of parks. You created a fucking community out of yours for people that needed a community. So thank you for that. And I want to say also to the San Francisco Gazette, if you put a paywall up, I can't fucking do much about supporting your stories. So, get past that. I don't know what to do
Uh,
about that. I know you need
all
the
the all
money, but it
these
can't
all
all
these
be
news
behind a
sites.
paywall.
Well, and that's the thing is like all these news sites are behind paywalls, and even then, it's like you got a fuck ton of advertisements. It's like,
Yeah,
what is it? Are you going to advertise so that way I can get the paper? Or is it just going to be
right.
paywall? Because if I'm going to pay for it, then I don't want the fucking ads.
Right. That's it. And I can't go around subscribing to the gazettes and little newspapers of the world. At some point, something has to be free. One of the stories that you're promoting should at least be free while you're promoting it on social media. I understand once it's not being promoted, it should go behind a paywall, but you can't promote it and then advertise on it and paywall it all at the same time and expect people to read it or talk about it
We got the
on a
same issue
national
with the
level.
we got the same issue with the newspaper out here is
Yeah,
that
I know.
it's behind a paywall and there's a shit ton of advertisements on the site. And then the other part is that a lot of the times the fucking writing is like eighth grade level. It's like
That's the other thing.
I'm not paying, fucking $10 a month for this. This is not worth it to me.
That's right. And you don't know until you subscribe, and then you find out it's all garbage. You know what I mean?
It's like
I'm not going to do it.
if I'm gonna pay $10 a month to have an article surrounded by ads, it's going to be the worst $10 that I've ever spent.
Right. And I want to know if that's worth it before I spend it.
Hmm.
I'm not going to spend it to find out it's garbage and I'm committed for a year.
Right.
Mm-mm.
And on top of that, it's like it gets to the point where like most of the community articles, like if there's something really important that the community needs to know, you can't even fucking access it. It's like,
That's right.
they literally like here for the longest, initially anything related to the coronavirus was a free article. So you could literally just open up anything related to coronavirus and read it from there.
Fucking liberals. Your access to information astounds the conservatives around you. You know what I mean?
So you put it behind a paywall and then you're like, why
Yeah.
are people watching
Why
Fox
are people
News?
dumb? Yeah. Marco Rubio was like, we need to increase domestic oil. I'll end on this one as far as me. And I wanted to explain to him, uh, domestic gas and oil, it's never been in more production under any other administration. Like, we didn't reduce it after Trump. We're still going at full capacity. The only way we could increase it is if we encroached on state parks and state preserves and lands. And that would mean you're not a conservative because you don't believe in conservator of the land. You know what I mean? And I wanted to ask Marco Rubio, do you know where hunters hunt? Do you know the lands that Americans use for their subsistence? Gun owners hunt. Where do hunters hunt? Like, don't take that land away from them if you don't need to. We're not in this crisis because we're not taking in Russian oil. We're in this crisis because gas and oil knows that we already predicted there would be an increase in prices. So they increased prices to
Like
make up the revenue they're losing in their investments in Russia.
like
It's not going up because it needs to go up. It's going up because everybody says it's going to go up.
and that's and for example, like we're the number one oil producer in the world. been that way since like what I think 2015. I want to say was when we
Exactly.
crossed that. We produce 18 billion barrels per day, or 18 million barrels per day
Russia,
of
5.
of oil, and like 11 million barrels of distillates, crude oil distillates, and stuff like that. Like we are the
Right.
largest producer. Period. It's just that we are a capitalist market and we sell our oil to other places rather than supplying Americans first.
Well,
Period. End of story.
it goes on to a global, it goes
Exactly.
into, yeah, and the global prices take over from that. And the other thing
Plus,
is the Keystone pipeline would not help this.
no.
It's not the quality oil we would use, and it wouldn't be done. It wouldn't
Well,
be
and here's
done.
the thing: is we need to clarify something. The Keystone Pipeline exists and is functioning. It's that XL diversion point that they were wanting to add on to it.
Ah, okay.
So that's it.
And
Keystone,
like you said, pipelines don't produce oil. It only transports it.
exactly. And that was the issue is that, you know, what would that, you would need to have a bigger and better pipeline all the way down to the Gulf in order to get, quote unquote, more production done. And everybody kept going, oh, this is going to cost jobs. It's going to cost jobs. And it's like the whole fucking thing made 40 permanent jobs. That's
Right.
it. It's like, yeah, sure, there was going to be some work for a little bit while they put in this
A
pipeline, but it
thousand
wasn't permanent.
workers.
1,000 workers, but it wasn't permanent jobs. And
Right.
that's the problem is that, it's not like those permanent, it's not like those pipeliners were just magically going to appear and then magically going to disappear. Those pipeliners
Right.
went to work on another project, period, end of story.
And this is to transfer oil sand, right?
Yes.
Not
Tar
oil,
sands.
but yeah, tar sands. And then it's processed and but you can't use that in your cars. Like we don't use that here, you know?
Yeah, it gets processed down into different products and distillates and
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
essentially used as what they call bunker fuel. And it's because it's dirty, it's nasty, and that's essentially what like the maritime shipping industry uses in order to.
Mm,
And if in case you haven't noticed, like we have a problem with our ports not being able to offload ships as it is. So
right.
um
Well, guess who else is price gouging in this day and age? It's the people shipping everything.
and I mean the reality is that when you have an organization like OPEC, oil prices are artificially high because
Yeah,
these countries are not producing at a rate that would allow for the lowest possible price. They
right.
are literally agreeing to what the price is going to be and then taming their production based on that.
They're colluding, which is against the law in America to do.
Yeah, you
If
can't have in
companies,
America, you
yeah,
can't have cartels, but because
right,
it's an oil industry, we literally function because the price function simply works the way that it does because of a
right.
cartel in another part of the world.
And that just means we have an Arab dick in our mouth, to get oil. Like
And which is
we gotta find it more important to not support tyranny and move to green energy than it is to suck a dictator's dick.
energy diversification, like we've talked about multiple
Right.
times. It's like, yes, there's going to be the need for oil, and we need to make sure that those demands are being met here. But at the same time, too, if you have a diverse energy source, a diverse power storage source, and a diverse usage source,
Right.
things like this don't fuck with your daily life as bad.
Boom. Love it. Hey, do you have any just the tips before we sign off?
Um,
Don't eat the yellow snow.
don't eat the yellow snow is always a good one. I would say my just the tip is make sure you do like regular maintenance, especially for yourself. It's important. Keeps your head in the right spot.
I love that. The other day I shaved my body top to bottom. I never felt better. Never felt better.
Make
Thanks
sure you
for being
change
here,
that razor
Jeffrey.
blade.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Because the bottom had an issue.
Ooh,
Thanks for being here, Jeffrey. I love you.
love you too.
Yay. Okay. And